giving some actual tips y'all can use in Figma. I'm just going to give it a few minutes for people to trickle in and for the stream to load on my end on Hopin. And let me know in the chat if you are here so I can hear you. Let me know in the chat how you're doing, how your hackathon was, and what you're most excited to learn about today. And I'll give it probably 1 or 2 more minutes for people to trickle in. Cool, I'm live. How's all your projects going? I finished the design. Cool, I'll give it probably 1 more minute. Oh, first time in a hackathon, nice, nice. How many of you are all this is the first time? Or in the chat, let me know if you are a designer, developer, or product manager, because design systems involve all these parties involved. And so whether you're mostly design developer, so whether you're a designer or developer, it's super, super important to know these principles in order to operate like in a company. So 3 design systems are used at the company. So this is a good prep for y'all when you work in industry. It's something that I never learned in school. It's something I kind of learned through interning and working at EA. Oh, cool. Graphic designer, self-taught UI UX designer, first hackathon. Nice, nice, nice. Cool. I'm also self-taught as well. Cool. We will get started. All right, cool. So welcome everyone to Creating Effective Design Systems. Today, I'll be giving you some tips on how to collaborate with designers and design and developer teams, as well as how to create a system that can basically scale your product and grow it from there as well. It's a really common industry practice to create design systems. So think of things like Google Material Design, how all Google products looks the same, or not look the same, but it looks you can recognize it as Google. And towards the second half of this presentation, I'll be going over interactive Figma. If you guys are at my Intro to UI UX Design workshop yesterday, we'll also be having another fun activity in Figma, so make sure to stay for that. And so for our agenda for today, we'll start with a little intro, design systems, what are they, and visual design, some fundamentals of visual design, and how designers and developers can utilize these simple principles to make their app much more usable and much more user-friendly. And some components, which are puzzle pieces like buttons, layouts, tab nav, and everything. And then we'll build together in Figma. And then I'll share some resources and tips where you can learn more about design systems and build your own libraries too. And so if you guys are new, I was here yesterday as well, but I'm Grace. I'm a full-time UX/product designer at Electronic Arts, and I also founded the largest design community in the world called Design Buddies. You can join the Discord link on the slides. And I'm a computer science and engineering student part-time at SCU at Santa Clara University in the Bay Area, and decided to take on a full-time role while being in grad school. And I have fun side hustles. I have my own little small art business where I table at anime conventions. In fact, the last anime convention I tabled at was SAC Anime in January 2020 before the whole lockdown happened. And I also create a lot of content on my social media and blog. And just a little brief background on myself, I started off my life as an aspiring anime artist and game designer. I was also really into social media and blogging and running. And I came into college as a bioengineering pre-med student because I was interested in knowing more how to biohack myself as a runner. And growing up in the Bay Area, I was always told I should go into STEM or be a doctor, engineer, lawyer. So that's why I majored in that. And then on the side, I started my own art business. And after being in bioengineering for a while, I realized I didn't really like the lab and working in the lab. So I decided to go into game design and computer science because I want to know how to make a game. And then later realizing after being in game dev for a while, after some internships, I realized I like game design and more specifically UX design. So just had to go into that. And along the same time, I started Design Buddies. Cool. And so for design systems, basically the central language for all. In the chat, let me know what you guys think a design system is. Like what comes to your mind when you think of design systems? And I'll give it a few seconds. Cool. So basically, if you think of things like Google Material Design, Apple Human Interface Guidelines, or IBM Carbon. These are basically a collection of reusable components. And so components meaning like things you see on the website, like buttons, cards, navigations, switches, and they usually have clear standards to build products. So for example, Google Material derives off real-world products. And so these are components governed by some kind of standard to build products. Basically, Visual Component is a part of that, but it's kind of, I'll go more into this soon, but it is definitely a part of that as well. And these collection of components, it's really important to have a standard because these are also shared by the whole team. And typically in a company setting, designers, developers, product managers, and more are involved with this as well. And also some branding and marketing to make sure that all the components on the website align to the company's brand. And so for all this talk, I'll also be giving some actionable tips on how you can build design systems for your project at your hackathon as well. And so a big misconception is that design system is a user interface kit. So UI kit is only how it looks like. Basically, you can create a UI kit for specific products. But for design system, it's typically shared with the whole company, where if you think of Google, they have like a lot of different products. And so that's why all Google products kind of feel the same. Like you can recognize something as Google because they create a system that's easy to be reusable by other products as well. And so UI kit basically just only the look, and design system is basically how it scales and how it usually governs by a few standards. Like sometimes Google Material, like for example, Apple Human Interface, they have very human friendly, like different voice and tones that kind of governs that as well. So I'll later be expanding upon this idea, but just make sure that UI kit is different. UI kit is a look and feel, and it's usually typically used by just one product, but design system is scalable, where you can build it with all the products you use in the company. And so basically the goal of having a standardized set of components is to enable design engineering teams to collaborate more effectively, which ultimately helps you build products faster, which is good for the company. So design systems are a relatively new field, but it's been gaining a lot of traction just because it helps people ultimately build products faster by a clear standard. And so typically on a design team, on a design systems team, mostly design and engineers. So as a designer, I've also worked on design systems at EA as well, and we typically just define the visual components, like building components in Figma, and also defining like how these standards are used. And the front end helps build the codes, the classes, the CSS classes for these components. And then product management comes in a little bit and just making sure that the voice and tone of the overall design system aligns to the customer and business needs. And then UX researchers also come into play, where they make sure that the components are accessible and just like validating user needs. And then sometimes content strategy will come in to make sure that the voice and tone and principles are supported in these systems. But typically it's mostly design and front-end engineers working on this in a company setting. And over here, you can find the map of my presentation today as well. And so super, super important, build products faster, and you build like a library of dynamic, reusable components. And it's both tied to design and code. Like UI kit only has a design, it's typically not tied to code. And so when it comes to making products, you can already use a system, a library that already has the code tied to it. So you can build products faster and help you stay consistent across all the products. Like Apple's products look similar, Google's products look similar, and everything like that too. Adobe's products look similar, including design systems. And so typically, design system contains a lot of different things. There's a style guide, which I will be going over some very basic visual design principles, where you don't have to have a design background to understand. These are like colors, type, icons, illustrations. And then you have a component library, which builds off these style guides. So like buttons, fields, and much more. And then sometimes you want to have a content guide, kind of just like the overall branding, the voice and tone you want to have with the design. And then it's always really important to ensure accessibility, like inclusive design best practices, making sure that people with disabilities and vision, hearing, or movement are able to clearly use your app. So for example, having enough contrast between your text in the background, or having clear focus states for people who use screen readers, and having alt text, and these best practices, super important to include. And also sometimes you want to have patterns or a reference site. So think of just like Google Materials site, Apple's human interface site. So these are just basically documenting everything to really tie everything together. So and yeah, and Google Material, like these are I'll later show some examples, but these are just like good references. And another thing I'll be going over, so atomic design principle is a kind of way of thinking about design systems, basically breaking it down so things are be able to understand things in a componentized manner. So atoms, these kind of build off each other, kind of just like science, how chemistry works. And so atoms are standalone elements. So these are kind of like buttons and icons. And then molecules are assemblies of elements. So think of like modals, search functions where you have an input field in a search button. And so these are like assembly of these atoms. And then you have organisms, which are much like assemblies of molecules, which are navigations like side nav, footer, and then these build up the templates, and then pages, which are products as well. Templates are for example, like CRM, content management system, like on website builders, like you have a template for a blog page, or on e-commerce sites, a template for your product page, and these all build off each other. So here are some examples. So this is Google's material design. This is a good way to get some examples and knowing some fundamentals. So Adobe Spectrum. Let me know in the chat if you ever visited sites like Google Material Design, or are even using this in your hackathon. And these also have the code components tied to them as well. So this is a good resource. And then Adobe has one too. And then like Salesforce Lightning is another great one as well for reference. And so how to build your own. And so I'll kind of talk in the context of a hackathon and also the context of an actual the company. Typically like best practices of other companies as well, not just EA. So definitely want to do an audit. So typically, I guess like right now, since you guys have a few hours of just hacking away, you guys kind of know what kind of branding elements and what components you need. And so definitely do an audit, track down, like, do you need a button? Do you need a tab nav? Is this product do you need like a both mobile responsive version, or it's on desktop only? And then you want to do a visual design inventory. So think of like what colors you want and everything too, and what kind of font you want. And then after you have these fundamentals down, like all the styles, you want to start building your components, which are basically the puzzle pieces that really tie in your app together. So now I'll be going over some fundamentals of visual design. Let me know in the chat if you have a design background or have no design background at all, so I know how deep to go. And so this is where we are. So typically you want to think of all these things when you're building products. Probably in a hackathon setting, you probably just have to care about the colors and type just because of the short time span. So colors, these should align to branding, but they should also be clear in highlighting what states. Oh, nice design background. UI UX class. Cool. Yeah, so this is probably some familiar things you've seen before. And so for colors, colors are used in different ways. Like there's like branding colors, you have to highlight different states. For example, using green for success, using red for warning, using different shade gradations of colors to highlight different hierarchies. So there's so much with color you can also look into as well. Oh, nice. No design background, did a UI UX design course at Springboard. Cool. And then next, you have to think about typography, how your text looks like, and what font to use, and also what weight to use to highlight different hierarchy as well, like bolding for more emphasis into separate sections on the page. So there's a lot to do with that. And also spacing, how you want your margin and padding to be, and how you want to separate elements to communicate an idea to people, and images, and also visual forms like shadows, making things look a bit elevated on the screen, like adding a drop shadow. Also some branding assets to consider as well. And so colors, this is actually the example I'll be showing is actually Design Buddy's design system for our website that I've worked with my team to build. Very simple design system compared to Google, but we have primary, secondary, and also background colors. And this is an example of an evergreen design system found on Figma community, where sometimes you have like dark mode or light mode, so different backgrounds for that as well. And also, kind of like utility colors, making sure that you're using similar semantics, like blue for info, yellow for warning. And then you also have different gradations, so different gradients of different shades of different colors to highlight different states. Like, for example, this is default state, this is like active state, this is inactive state, and things like that. There's so much to consider with color. But the main color uses are, you definitely want to have a primary colors. So basically, these include different states, basically, like this ones. And then sometimes you want to have secondary colors, basically like an accent to it. Like, for example, these colors we have for design buddies, which are typically used in our backgrounds. And then semantic colors, super, super important. These are non-design buddies, but these kind of highlight different states you have. And also layout colors. So for example, if you want to have light mode versus dark mode, you should have a different color set for that as well for accessibility. And so just some color tips. Making sure that you name everything correctly. So important, especially it's so easy to like, at least for hackathons, I guess for like a hackathon's context, this is not as important, but when you're working in a company, making sure you're having very consistent naming conventions. So for example, mapping your color to the function, so developers can easily know what it is, not just like pink, but just like brand primary, and then mapping it to the hex code so it can be tied to the class. And also determining your brand colors early. So you guys can start doing that now. Like what's the main color palette you want with your app? And usually it's like 1 or 2 colors because they spread quickly and wildly. So you want to set them early so you don't have to like update too much at the end as well. And also make sure you check for accessibility. So the WCAG is a Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And also there's the A111Y Figma plugin, which checks your frames for accessibility best practices to make sure you have enough contrast between the background and your text. And also using familiar patterns, so important, making sure you don't use green for warning and green means success and things like that. Because design is all about making things useful and using patterns that humans are already familiar with, not designing something completely new because that's art. And also last thing is limited amount of shades and tints. So only use colors if you have a meaning to. Like don't use too many because it will become very confusing and be harder to manage. Making sure all the colors you choose have an intention for that. And another resource I like to share is the Coolers, which is color palette generator as well. I will be linking some resources throughout this presentation and dropping the slides in the Discord as well towards the end, just like what I did with my presentation last night. So you'll have access to all these, so don't worry too much about writing these down. But this is like one of my favorite color palette generators that I've actually used during hackathons to make really, really quick color palettes for my apps. And the next foundation of visual design is size and spacing. So basically the grid system, how big your elements are. And so usually you hear like base 8 design system or base 8 measurements because the default browser font size for a web-based app is 16. So we have everything multiples of 8, and also screen sizes are typically multiples of 8. So making sure like everything from like font sizes, the size of your elements, spacing, everything is multiples of 8 is also another common practice, but it also depends on the design system. Like for example, at EA we use base 2, but just because we have a really diverse range of products, but 8 point is definitely the most common. And then when you want to collaborate with design developers, you want to establish a really clear clear measurement. So you want to use pixels or rems. Rems are basically relative to the size of the width of the letter M's on your screen. And there's different pros and cons. It really depends on what the developer is most familiar with. But pixels are pretty rigid and exact, but it's less flexible. So let's say you have different screen sizes and the fonts change a little bit. It will stay the same as well. And rems are always based on font size, and typically one rem is usually 16 pixels, but it's more flexible and responsive. But it might be a little more confusing, especially in the beginning, so that's why I recommend pixels instead of translating everything as well. This was M's as well, if you want to look even more into that. And this ensures consistency all across all your products. So making sure your font sizes, multiples of 8, spacing between elements, multiples of 8, margins, gutters, multiples of 8 as well. So when in doubt, making sure everything's multiples of 8 when you're designing something on your screen. And also, now we're going to typography, the other visual design principle. And so there's different use cases of typography. So there's marketing, where sometimes you might want to have larger differences in word sizes to have different emphasis on different things. And also editorial, so like copy, basically like an article conveying a lot of information. We have smaller differences of sizes. Sometimes you use typography to convey data on the screen as well. So different use cases and ensure like different best practices as well. And there's also a lot of different facts to consider when you're doing typography. It's not just like words on the screen, but there's like so much of these words that I wasn't aware before once I started building design systems. So there's something like line length, basically how long your sentence is stretched. Because if you have something too long on your screen, then it becomes really hard to read because you like read across the whole screen and then like your eyes kind of get lost jumping into another part of your screen. And so it's important to consider these like different boundaries, these best practices that I researched. Typically like 50 to 70 characters per line, and mobile shorter, so making sure people can easily read your content, easily digestible as well. And then for the line height, basically how spaced out your text is. And typically 150% is a sweet spot, because if you have it too close together, it's harder to read. And if it's too far apart, then it's hard to see if this is like the same paragraph. It's hard to like know that this is actually talking about the same thing. And so that's why 150%, which is the auto setting on Figma, if you're making your apps on Figma, is a sweet spot. It's also really, really important for accessibility to make sure people can read the content on your app as well, of your product. And then there's letter spacing, also known as kerning. So how far letters are horizontally spaced apart. And it's really important to not use too loose, because it's hard to tell that it's just like, it's because the further away your letters are, it becomes harder to tell it's the same word. Same with very tight as well. So you want to go with default as well. And also letter case. So this kind of goes with your voice and tone. So do you want your titles to be all caps to really emphasize something? Title case or sentence case. So this is title case I used on the headings, which is basically a lot the big words capitalized. But sentence case is like a sentence, like what I'm doing over here, where only the first letter of the sentence is capitalized. But making sure you're consistent across your whole app as well, something to consider and having discussion with. It might seem small, but it really affects a lot of things. And then continuing on typography, there's so much to do, so much to say about typography. And also there's also font style. So using these for emphasis, like bolding and italicizing text, and links for underline. And again, kind of going back to semantics. So links are typically underlined. So don't use underline if you're emphasizing something. Only use it for links, because people are drawn to like click on this. Like I know like this, it makes you want to click on it, but it doesn't actually take you anywhere. And also scaling, again, starting with root elements, so 16 pixels and scaling up from there. And there's also, I'll give you some resources after this as well, but there's like another type ramping scale calculator we can use as well, to think of like how big you want your text to be. And also the color of your text should be easy to read. So having a base color like black or close to black as well, and linking together, and also components, and all these factors affect accessibility. And so it's so important to make sure everything is accessible. And so having a minimum font size of 16 pixels, especially in a web app, it's definitely smaller for mobile, but for desktop app, 16. And then having enough contrast ratios between the color of your text in the background. And also making sure that if you have smaller text sizes, you increase the font weight a little bit so it's easy to read, so making it more bold. And also making sure you have enough spacing between small text, so making sure it's easy to read as well, not grouped too close to each other, and making sure you have 140 to 80% line height, so all your text paragraphs are easier to read. And then typescale.com, I'll be also sending this I'll be sending these slides on Discord. But this is a way we can calculate all the different ratios. So you don't have to do any math. This will calculate all the font sizes you should have on your app. So I feel like there's a potential pun if you mix kerning with OS. Yes, definitely. That's funny, Jenny. Yeah, I also studied computer science, so I had to do that as well. But yeah, back on topic. So we have some additional elements to consider when thinking of visual design for a design system. So shadows basically convey the amount of basically the depth of the drop shadow you have. Highlights how far away is your object from the background. And so usually you use this when you have buttons. So you know something is like clickable, you want to like press it. So you use shadows, drop shadows in Figma to do that. And sometimes you have to have different corners and edges. So for example, if you use rounded corners, that makes your design look more friendly. If you use more sharp corners, it looks more professional. So it really depends on going back with your content strategy team to determine the look and feel. And this will reflect what kind of like corners you want to use as well. So there's a lot of details to consider. And also having grid system as well, also something to consider as well. We usually use base 8 or a 12-point grid system, but this also really depends on your product. As long as something is multiples of 2, that should be fine. But typically, multiples of 8 are best practices, but also, again, it depends on your design systems. For example, at EA, we're using base 2 just because we work on a whole suite of like player and employee experience products. So we want to be really flexible. That's why I use base 2. But if you want to work on just your product, it's probably best to do base 8. Just keep things more consistent. Yes, Jenny, thanks for sharing that. Typescale.com for y'all to use to determine how big your text sizes are. Like, you never, like, it makes such a big difference, the text sizes on your screen in terms of visual design. So make sure you have these aligned so your app looks very nice and easy to use. And these are just some more resources y'all can use that I'll be sharing this again as well. So you can have naming convention best practices, so it helps you collaborate with designers and developers much more easier. And then design systems checklist, basically you basically want to do an audit through all the components you need, but these are some suggestions of things you have to consider, and like states you want to consider. For example, in buttons, you want to have hover state, active state, things like that, but I'll be going into components next. And then color palette generator and type scale calculator that I shared earlier as well. And so for now, we'll be going over some components, some puzzle pieces of your app. So now we're here building the component library after you have all of the fundamentals down. And so now, after you kind of got your visual design and principles down, you have your colors, type, spacing models down. So all these foundations are so important because these all build off each other to make components. So now you have atoms, which are standalone elements. Like I mentioned this before, but these are like buttons, icons, and fields, molecules, organisms, templates. These all build off each other. Kind of going back to atomic design principle, like I've showcased before. So this is kind of like, you can read more about this online, but this is a way of thinking about how you want to scale your design system up and how different components on your design system relate to each other and connect to each other. And then soon we'll be going into Figma at the next section to build your own design systems. And I'll show some Figma tips and tricks y'all can use. And for just some quick tips for the design system, making sure you're naming all the layers, whether you're using Figma or XD, it's so important to name all the layers you're using, just so developers can come in and inspect your component and be able to translate that into code. Also, want to have clear documentation onboarding, so making sure you document everything, like all the states, what they mean, why use this color, why is this drop shadow here, and just to making sure that new designers can be able to use your app. And also making it really developer friendly, using basically establishing the visual design principles first. So making sure these are already found in the CSS libraries. And then focusing on the essential components first. Like the size of your design system depends on your product, depends a lot. And just like making sure you focus on the MVP first and expanding on from there, so you don't get too overwhelmed. And also you can think of like different edge cases later too. And so typically in the naming convention, me and my friends 1 to 100, definitely relatable. But if you're just making a little like nice little design in Figma, and you don't have to like hand it to developers, then naming frames just 1 to 100 is okay. But if you're actually handing these products, especially in a company setting, and handing it to your developers, so important to making sure you're naming the layers so they know what you mean. And I'll also be going over some best practices of layer naming now and also during the DIY portion. And so typically this is just like an idea to name. So component type and state. So we have buttons. So these are primary buttons. And there's secondary buttons and state default, state hover state. So it's more emphasized, so you know it's indicating for that as well. And then for design buddies, just an example, we have our fluffle design system. We have different types of buttons like primary, secondary, and text, and different states you can have as well. And we use different gradations. So we have our primary brand color, which is pink, which is shown in the default. And then if you want to hover over, it's more darker, kind of like a blood red, and also disabled, so it's a little bit faded, so you know it's inactive. So using gradations to communicate with users what the states are, also how you want to integrate colors in your components as well when you're building them. Thanks, Jenny, for sharing the resources. And then this is just an example of a design system checklist you can use. It's a bit small, but essentially it highlights, so for example, it highlights different elements you should have, like colors. You should have accessibility guidelines, dark mode, functional colors, aka semantics, and for core components, buttons, all the states, and things like that as well. And these are some ideas of checklists to have that might be useful when you are making an audit through what kind of components you need. And then now I will be going into Figma. I will be dropping this link. Let me know in the chat how familiar you are with Figma so I know how deep to go into. Or if you've been to my workshop yesterday, it's pretty similar. I made a really similar file to do that. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat, making sure y'all can edit it as well. Anyone can edit. So I'll drop this link in the chat, so make sure you can come in. And then let me know in the chat how familiar you are with Figma. And then if you don't have Figma, you can create a free account. It's 100% browser-based, so y'all can come in as well. I guess maybe you can, for the interactive portion, maybe you can also make an account. It's free. It's really quick. I probably should have said it in the beginning as well. But let me know in the chat how new with Figma. I can just give a really brief rundown in case people are new to Figma. I should probably lock these instead, so don't accidentally move it. But so Figma, this is a Figma file. We have different pages to separate different sections of the file. And then we have our workshop portion. So if you ever get lost, click on my avatar on the top right to spawn to where my component is, where my cursor is. And so this is on the top left. You can make different things on the screen, like different shapes and text and everything as well. Oh, cool! I make a pretty full app. Oh, nice, nice. I love that Kermit picture. Love it. And then over here, you can find all the contents in the current page you have in Figma. And then you have design, prototype, and inspect, where you can have different properties. So this is where you spend the most time toggling different things. And also prototyping and linking screens together and inspecting it, seeing all the CSS properties where you can share with developers as well. You can also have access to iOS and Android. And prototyping, basically linking screens together. So what I did with my slides, I basically prototype together. So they're like a presentation, so they flow. And so we will be going over some DIY portions. And so I'll be going over how to make styles and then how to build components and some advanced Figma tips, how to utilize variants to make your design system even more robust. And I'm going to make sure everyone has access to this as well. And after this, I'll be going over even more resources and best practices on how you can start building design systems. So for the first part, we're going to start with styles. So this is a very, very quick shortcut to do in Figma. And so what we're going to do is feel free to come under here and make a shape. So click on R or click on this rectangle over here and just click on rectangle. We can make the other shapes as well, but we're going to be on a rectangle. So click on rectangle. And then once you click on rectangle or shortcut R, your cursor will become a plus icon. And then you can draw a Figma. You can draw a rectangle on the screen. And so feel free to do that right now. And so I'm going to start with pretty basic Figma tips, and then I'll go into component building after this. But this is just a very time-saving shortcut y'all could use during your hackathon that I've wished I've adopted earlier instead of having to enter the hex code of all of them. And let me know if anybody has trouble accessing the file, y'all should be able to edit. But it looks like y'all can edit it as well. So now that you've made your shape over here, I'll give everyone a few moments to spawn here. If you ever get lost in a file, click on my avatar in the top right, and you'll spawn to where my cursor is on the screen. You can follow along with me live over here. And then now, after y'all made your shape, feel free to click on fill. And then if you click on this here over here, you'll open the color panel, and you can like click on any color you want. You can also change the hue and saturation and opacity and things like that. Or can choose my vegetable green. Oh, you can also make a circle as well. Any shape works. Or create any shape. So we're gonna do a little sky blue over here. So after doing that, so now we're gonna save the color as a style so we can reuse it all across your whole app. So you don't have to enter the hex code every time. So when developers come in, they can just see the colors and make the class once instead of having to do that multiple times. So now after getting the colors down, we want to open the style. So go to fill over here, clicking on the 4 dots, style. Once you hover over, you should see style. And then you want to create a new style. So after you open this, you'll see this menu over here with the default styles. And then you want to click on plus icon and you want to name it. And also we want to be really careful about naming convention. So we want to use like primary. So for example, this is like a primary brand color. So primary sky blue. I have vegetable green on my example over here, but you can use any color you want. Sky blue, just for demo purposes and create style. And yeah, the slash naming conventions is typically pretty standard as well. And now that you clicked on it, you see primary sky blue. And when you click away from your file, you can also see it here as well. So you have access to all the color styles you've used in your whole app. And so yeah, that's how you make color style. And then once you want to apply it to different things, I made a new shape. I can easily click here, and now I have styles. The reason why I use slash naming convention because Figma automatically sorts these colors based on their first item on before that first slash. So you can easily, let's say in the future, you have a whole library. You have like brand colors, you have secondary colors, you have semantic colors, you have dark mode versus light mode. It basically organizes it into sections you can use. So that's why we use that slash naming convention. So now that we've created our color styles, we have everyone's color styles over here. If we create a new shape, we can just like add it automatically. Like if I want to create an ellipse, I can click here and add it. Instead of having to go to the fill tool or do the hex code, you can just automatically assign colors right away. So the really great shortcut you guys can use if you're making your SacHacks project in Figma, setting color styles, you'll thank yourself in the long run too. I love that gradient. Cool. So now let me know in the chat if you ever have any questions. Otherwise, we'll move on to typography. So we can do a very similar thing with typography. And so let me move this in the center a bit. And so now, now we're done with colors. I see everybody's nice color styles coming on nicely here. You can use typography. And so for this part, you can click T or over here on the top left here, you can create a text box. And once you click on this, your cursor should become a plus. It can drag to any size you want and type hello world or any message you want. You also make it bigger. And then this, you can customize any text settings you want. Let's just say I want like size 24. And then I also want Roboto Wavy Poppins. That's my favorite font, Poppins. Comment your favorite font in the chat and feel free to set your typography to your favorite font. And so, yeah, for real, like make a text box. And then over here, you can edit all your text settings over here. You can adjust the font weight, make it bold. And then you can adjust the sizing and also adjust the line spacing. So line height, what I mentioned before, auto is a setting you want, and this makes it automatically 150 height, so you don't have to worry about measurements or any math. And then you can have line spacing, aka kerning or the kernel joke, and also paragraph spacing and different font sizes. So all these properties, like different alignments as well. Hello world, nice, 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 cool. So I see everyone's nice text elements on the screen here. Let me know in the chat if you're all able to edit it. I think based on what I've seen, y'all should be able to edit it. Graphic design, yes, Comic Sans, best font. No sleeping, oh wow, hardworking. Yeah, feel free to type any salmon caviar row. Nice, nice. I love seeing all your creative messages and creative colors you have. Oh, I see a nice drop shadow as well. Sasa, unfortunately, I don't know what that means. If you want to explain in the chat, let me know as well. But nice. Salmon caviar row, hello world, graphic design. And yeah, so now you have your textile set. You want to open your style. So you can basically save these styles, the same thing as like very similar way you save colors. And so you can also do this with colors as well. Definitely Comic Sans best fonts. And so now you want to save your style. So this textile saves all these settings over here. So you want to open your style and then create a new style over here. And name it. So for example, we want like body small, or this is like heading H1. Heading title or something. So this is like the title page of your mobile app. Oh, reference to Attack on Titan, nice. I've watched Attack on Titan like a really long time ago, but I haven't caught up on the most recent seasons. But I love the music, especially Barricades. That one's a great soundtrack. But yeah, so now you want to save your titles. The / naming convention helps it save to different points. And now we have your textile saved. So now we have it here. Heading / title. And now if you ever want to create another text element on your screen, you're going to break the style. Let's just say you made a Comic Sans or Comic Moon, and then you've like adjusted a lot of settings to it. And then if you want to have the same text style, you can just go in here and type title and it will become the same. So basically applying the same principles of saving styles in Figma to saving styles for the colors and applying them to your text as well. Nice. I love the Attack on Titan openings. Little side note on YouTube, there's like people made anime openings for 2020 and also 2021, like the year. So you should check that out as well. They use a lot of Attack on Titan soundtracks. Fun side note, since I see y'all Attack on Titan enthusiasts in the chat. Nice, nice. No sleep, gang. And now we have our textiles over here. So now you can basically change it to any of the textiles you have here set as well. Let me know if people are lost in the chat. You can also change the text to different colors as well, like the color you set, hello world. But this does not affect the textile. No matter what color your text is, it will basically copy all these properties. It won't touch the colors as well, so colors is not affected by this. Feel free to name your textile anything. This is Comic Sans. This is like graphic design. Cool. For the sake of time, so we have about like 20 minutes left. For the sake of time, we'll move forward to here. Feel free to like keep making your shapes in Figma, just fun. But I really want to deep dive into component building. So these are just some best practices you guys can use to like build simple components and carry these on to building larger components. So you can head to where my cursor is in Figma. And for variants, they're really, really quick. So this will only take like less than a minute, but we'll be spending like at least 5 minutes in our button space. So you can click on my avatar over here to spawn to where my cursor is. So we're going to create a button together in a component setting and naming all the layers and taking you guys through some best practices. So feel free to come over here. We can have all the buttons. Cool. I know I love seeing all your messages as well, but for the sake of time, we're gonna move to buttons. So these are some instructions I have. Feel free to refer to this if you ever get lost. So we're gonna create a rectangle. So we're gonna just click here, create a rectangle, and make it 214 by 60. So for the sake of time, I can also like just duplicate a bunch. And then we want our button. So this is an example from the fluffable design system for design buddies. Our voice and tone, we want to be really friendly. So we have rounded corners. So we're going to make the border radius over here 60. And then a corner radius. So this is like an easy version of doing buttons. There's a little like shortcut, but I won't show that just because it was harder for me to understand when I was starting out design. I don't want to put that on you all. So yeah, after you have all your shape down, or you can make your button any shape. Let's be creative. You want to be a circle button? Do you want to? Usually buttons are typically rectangular. So have your button over here, and then you want to add text. You can add any text you want, but we can do button. Or we can just use the same text style we made. Heading. Or not heading. We can just use body large, or it could actually just be any button you want. We can do 18. Or no, I should be able to do 24. Button over here. And you want to put it center line into here. So you have your button text. And then you want to add your colors. So we can also add primary red over here, and then make the text white as well. We can choose any color you want. And then you want to rename your layers. So if you click on your element on the screen, the rectangle will appear. Like we have a lot of rectangles. So you want to name this the background of your button, making sure your correct naming conventions. Background, and then your label, which is your text. Button as label, so your button label. And then you want to highlight both. Select both layers, making a little shape like you're cropping it, and then adding auto layout. So click on this plus button over here. So this will add auto layout. And once you click that, you'll see frame over here because auto layout makes elements on the screen a frame. And this auto layout is so amazing because it makes your padding stay consistent. So let's say you have a really long button, the padding will stay consistent. You also have multiple line buttons, it stays consistent as well. So you want to add auto layout. Another like big, really great feature of Figma as well that is auto layout. And there's so much you can do with it. But this is an example of what you can do in the component setting. Start game, nice. A play button. Love seeing everyone's buttons here. And yeah, seeing padding stays consistent, like click me please. And then now we're going to make it a component. So now I see everybody's frames. You select your frame, so making sure it looks blue right now. But head to the top middle where you have this little diamond shape. This is when you want to create your component. So click on this, and then it becomes purple. So this is your master component. And if you can create children of your masters or instances of your component. And when you update the master, all your instances will, all your children. So I'll just use a parent and children analogy. They're just like trees in programming. So this is like your parent, and you can make children's, which are instances. So your parent equals component, children equals instances. And so after that, you can name it. Also, that's basically why we're doing components, just so your instances, your children can inherit the properties of your parent. So in case you want to change the brand colors, in case you want to change something, everything updates automatically. So you know how to do everything like one by one. And oh, nice, Angel, it's the first hackathon. And so you notice this is still named Frame 263. We want to be good at naming conventions so we can basically make the developers' lives easier and able to build products faster. So this is going to be like a primary button. So you want to do component/primary. And if you want to go to tertiary level, you can also name the state. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to do button/primary. For everyone to name. We can also name it anything you want as well. Just have to be creative. Wow, my child. Yes, I love that. And so now you have a component. So your parent will have a diamond shape. And now you can create instances of your component. And another way to duplicate this is making sure your cursor is over it and then hover over it, click Option your keyboard, so your cursor becomes this double thing. It can drag and create children. So this is, wow, my child, yes. So now we create instances of a component. And if you look over here, this is the parent, and the assets panel, this is the parent with a diamond shape, and the instances will have a diamond shape without the fill in it. So you know it's the child of your button. And then what you can do, you can also do this in your project as well, is if you just change the color of your button, your children will update as well. So this is a great way for y'all to do. And so your children will update along with it too. And yeah, I'll give it a few moments for everyone to do. I have a message right now. Cool. I'll wait for a few seconds. I had to respond to this emergency message right now, but feel free to keep playing around with instances and yeah. So I'll give it a few minutes. And so yeah, so I see y'all with your instances over here. Cool. And now if you update, and also if you want to change the properties of your instances, then you can also make it different. So let's just say your children wants to be a different color, or your children wants to have a different corner radius, or I mean, sorry, different color. You can also have a different text. So this is the children, the child. You can also change it to Comic Sans. And then it will just update the child, not the actual parent itself. We can also change the children, the text. Just make it bold. Let me just make it a little different. Basically, you can change. So if you update your parent, it will update all the children. If you update the child, it will only update the child and not affect the parent. How do you type on the slide again? You can just keep clicking in the layer and it'll transport you into all of it. Cool. Click me, no, click me, no me. I love this. I love what y'all making the buttons. Start game, end game. Nice, nice. Cool. So we have a few moments left. I'll give everyone some time to make their buttons. And then you can also adjust like the corner radius. Make it like 20, the padding. And so because we have a custom set to our child, it won't affect it. But basically you can carry these principles. So again, if you change the parent, it will update all the child. If you change the child, it will only update the child itself, not the parent. Cool. So now we're going to do variance. So I'll give everyone a few moments to do here. So now we can do some variance here as well. Click on the T. Oh, how do you type on the slide? Oh, I thought you meant how to type on the button. If you click T or T on top, you can make a text element on the screen. Cool. So now I'm seeing you guys understand what this is. So we're going to move on to variants. So I've made a system of components over here already made for y'all. So we have different states. So we're ultimately going to create something like this. And so basically we want to group all of them together. So feel free to claim a triplet of buttons. So you want to highlight all of them. And also after you do before, feel free to spawn over here. If you get confused, feel free to click on my avatar and go to where my cursor is. So feel free to highlight a triple three. So I named them all, like this is like the different states, the default, the hover, and the disabled. And we can combine them as variants. So again, I want to highlight all of them. And then on the right corner, there's combine as variants over here. So we'll highlight all of them and then combine as variants. So highlight and combine. And just click one button on the right panel. And these are all be variants. And so variants are super, super useful because once you have a really big design system, you can easily create one and then it will make it so easy. So we're going to like build one together and I'll show you how to use it. So now you have buttons as well. And then now you have your button variants. So these are all button types. And so this kind of simplifies it more. And so we're going to name, so after you combine these as variants, we're going to name different properties and values. So this is type. So this is the property. So type of button like primary, secondary. So we only have primary for now. And then we have state, which we use to define the different primary states. We have state. And then after this, we're done basically. And what the magic of this is, we're going to create a children of this parent as a variant. So We're gonna have a button here. So this is the children. And now with variants, this is the magic right here. You can change it to different states. Like you have disabled, you can do hover. So now you're basically you add another complexity to it to be even more flexible and robust. And so you have default, disabled, and hover with it too. And so now, because the children you're a parent, you can also update them to different states you choose. So this is really great when you're having a really big library of different states. And yeah, so that's how Variant works. Feel free to try it out on your own as well. And for different this is a 3-dimensional one, a 2D one, where you can also this is one I've attached here, so I can drag one out. You can also change the secondary, different states. So all these options are available. So every child has potential to change into any of their parents, I guess. I guess that's kind of weird to say an analogy, but the instance can change to anything available here with the click of a few options. So this is how you set these up as variants. So this is what variants are amazing. And so with our last 3 minutes we have here, I'm going to go over some resources and some tips you can use. And also feel free to ask me any questions in the chat. I'll make sure to have some room for it. And a big resource is the Figma community, which are basically open source design systems for y'all to use. So I don't have to make everything from scratch, but at the hackathon setting, you can just group up things together. And then there's also free Figma plugins that helped me personally build components. So the contrast checker, component cloner, instance finder, design lint, finding missing styles on your designs. And also for design and developer collaboration, there's Storybook, which is basically a UI component library, and also Figma has best practices. And then just some final tips. I know it can be pretty intimidating to see so much things to do, but design systems are never really done. Basically, don't wait until all elements are done before using it. You can just start anytime, even right now, do an audit of your hackathon project and work on this. And design systems are also meant to be collaborative. So making sure you're working with the team to align. So UX and product designers collaborate, brand designers, developers work really closely. And so design systems are also more than UI kit. UI kit is just how it looks and feels, but design systems includes basically principles and also code to it. So it can be used to build products, and UI kit only it's typically only used for one product and only determines look and feel. And then you can build a design system anytime. No such thing as too big or too small, and everyone's needs are different. And yeah, this concludes my presentation. Feel free to connect with me on any of my social media platforms and join Design Buddies as well. And feel free to let me know in the chat if you have any questions. But I'll drop my link so y'all connect as well in the chat. And then feel free to join Design Buddies. We're actually hosting a social with SacHacks after this. Not after this, at 6 p.m. Pacific time today. And I'm also doing another workshop on design careers and how to basically get in without applying. My experiences on getting my internship and full-time job at EA without applying 100% through networking. So you should definitely join that if you're interested in design careers, whether you are an intern or a new grad as well. I'll be giving some tips where you can't find anywhere else, non-Googleable tips. And yes, man, Design Buddies is definitely where it's at. Thank you. Cool. I'll be staying 1 or 2 minutes more for any questions in the chat. Feel free to let me know. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'll be sharing my slides onto Discord as well, so y'all have access to it. Oh yeah, you're welcome, Michael. I think it's at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's updated on the website, but it's at 2 p.m. tomorrow, so you should write that down on your calendar. I think it'll be announced. And yeah. Cool. We are at time, so thank you all for coming. Yeah, it's 2 p.m. So it's on the guide. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Cool. I guess this concludes my presentation. I have to hop up to another panel at another hackathon now, but thank you all for coming. I hope you have a nice day, and I'll be dropping these resources in Figma, and feel free to connect with me or reach out for any questions you have as well. And happy hacking as always, stay positive and test negative.